Okay.
So they wouldn't make it.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as they know what's talking about. Will they know? introduce yourself.
No, I mean, I have a slide talking about myself, but how do you pronounce the last name?
Andersen? Am I saying it wrong?
I think people will understand anyway.
You go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm actually curious now. And there's a camera right here. So, I'm gonna see.
So is it not Andersen the whole time?
Oh, no, I mean, okay, that's actually how we would say it. There's no reason we should be speaking English.
That's okay, but how would you say it? We're live. Andersen?
Andersen.
Andersen.
Yes.
Okay. We're live. Oh.
Right.
We're live, all right.
Well,
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our third entry in our speaker series, and we have Jacob Andersen with us today, and he's coming from Business Impact, and he's the business intelligence developer and consultant at Business Impact. He has a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration and International Management, as well as a Master of Science in Business Intelligence, both from Aarhus University in Denmark.
yes.
Great. And his past jobs, actually his current job was offered to him after he was working as an intern while writing his thesis. And before that, he was a junior marketing analyst for a large e-commerce site in Denmark. And meanwhile, he does work with for his family business as well, which is an e-commerce site for outdoor-related articles. And I'll turn it over to him, and he can talk a little bit more about himself. So let's welcome Mr. Andersen here.
Right. So, quick disclaimer. This is my first presentation in English for non-professionals in this area here. So please raise your hand vertically or digitally if you have any questions or use terminology that you're not familiar with. My agenda is fairly ambitious. I was told to talk a little bit about me and my job. I'm going to talk a little bit about business intelligence in general. That might be the part we'll be skipping slightly if we get pressed in time. I'm going to talk a little bit more interesting about the role as an analyst regarding business intelligence. We're going to have a Q&A session. Videos are mandatory. And finally, if there's more time, I had a demo, but that one, for technical reasons, did not get in, which I actually anticipated, which was nice. And otherwise, I have some tips and tricks for analysts. So let's get started. My overall goal is that if I can answer any of your questions, then I'm great. I mean, I'm trying to guess what you might want to listen to. I want to promote my field secondarily. Finally, the last point, that's going to be networking session out afterwards. If you guys have any additional question, I might be asking back. I did a quick Wordle on my own LinkedIn profile, which isn't very updated. But I just thought that it was a good example of how big business is. And for the analyst, I really cannot say this strong enough. Business needs to be front and center in what you do. You have intelligence, you have analytics, you have my hometown there too. Well, business front and center, please. So let's talk a little bit about me. As already introduced, my name is Jacob Andersen. I'm from Denmark. You might hear a slight accent. I'm not fully assimilated. I come from Aarhus University in Denmark, which is a top 100 in the world university, so I would argue it's respectable at least. And here you have my email and LinkedIn account if you want to connect with me further after this. My wife said this was a terrible picture. She said it sent the wrong signal. I don't know why. I think it's a perfect picture of me, but she argued that it might be looking like I was driving while taking a selfie. I argued that there is something called buses, and I might have been in the UK, sitting on the left side. So my argument is that no one got hurt. All right, so let's talk a little bit about me again. So how did I start to live the BI dream, as I call it? Really, as probably many, I got introduced to analytics, statistics, descriptive statistics in my bachelor. And they caught on because there's a lot of topics where you just discussed and sat around the table to get ideas. And I recognized that there's going to be 100 million of those people. And there's only going to be a few people that actually want to engage with the numbers and the data. So I saw this as an opportunity for me to find some blue ocean, if you will, where there'd be lots of room and lots of demand, because I didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. My stepdad started a family business, an e-commerce site, got into Google Analytics, did some web analytics. That was kind of my gateway drug into data. Choice of graduate program, kind of the same thing. I wanted to have a certain skill set. A lot of so in Denmark, a lot of the bachelors are general. I got like a general fundamental, a lot of introductionary courses to blank. I wanted to have some real skills, and that's why I chose flip the coin between finance or BI. Those were really the two fields I was interested in, and it became BI. I can later on expand why. Meanwhile, it's also very common that you have a student job in Denmark, getting some real-life work experience while studying full-time. And I happened to find a nearby company, our version of Target, if you will, the e-commerce side of that. And I started out copy-pasting links, like taking links, putting them into from A to B. I ended up being, I wouldn't call myself a lead analyst, but I was definitely the only analyst that was in the department from a web analytics perspective. So I kind of created my own job there. So I got on, I chose my graduate program, I got into business intelligence. A lot of the coursework, I think, matches to some extent what you guys have. A lot of analytics, a lot of research methods, data mining, a lot of turning numbers into actionable data. However, we did not have your paradigm of finding your own data sets. We kind of were working with pre-made data, so it was a little not as helpful as it could have been. However, that combined with my job at Kildaire, which is the name of the store, I realized that my skills as an analyst was definitely increasing. However, there was this bridge, there was this gap between what I wanted to employ with the data, what I wanted to do, and then how heavily I was relying on IT to get the right data. And that gap became like I had to wait 3 weeks to get the data, and it was always wrong, and it was just, they hated me, I hated them, and it was a terrible situation. I realized I needed to get more into BI, which is slightly more IT, it's still analytics, but it also deals with the aspect of all the way from raw data. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So I found an internship here in the state. Actually, I got offered two. I got one from a local company called Printtiles, and another one for my current residency at Business Impact. And it was pretty much a choice between a huge company or a tiny company, and I chose the tiny. Again, for questions, I can expand on how. Whoops. Currently, I've been, after a year, I got a full-time job, and one of the things I did right was that I kind of saw this as my hobby, and I just said, all right, how long time have I ever spent on math in my elementary school? Like some of the core things I know today, how much time did I actually spend on it? And I realized it isn't really that long time that you've actually spent on it actively, right? Not just sitting and listening to music. So I said, all right, let's quit American Idols and whatever television you have over here. And I started using, so when I came home, instead of watching telly, I would go on YouTube, complete a tutorial, learn a new language, coding language, not Japanese or anything like that. But anyway, that was the best thing I ever did because it took me less than 6 months and I was already on the level where I could be paid good money. I was an expert. Doesn't take longer than 6 months, just be focused. Sorry. So I currently work for Business Impact. It's a small company founded in 2005. We roughly, I think we're around 10 people plus contractors. We spread over, I want to say 5 states. Yeah, and we are pretty much from turnkey solution, meaning that we're all the way from raw data all the way into providing software and training. So we deliver like the full package. We even have our own cloud servers so people can even get hosting at our place. We can talk a little bit more about that later, what a business intelligence solution actually is. Just want to mention some of the industries I work with just to illustrate the fact that we're also very wide in our, we have wineries as one of our primary, it was fun. We have pharmaceuticals, those are less fun. We have a financial institution, which is the least fun. You wouldn't believe the amount of rules there is in financial institutions. And that's also when you want to be an analyst, you also have to anticipate the kind of corporation you want to work for. How much red tape is there going to be? How difficult is it going to be? Now, try to work for a healthcare provider and recognize how strict some of the rules are. And you may not be able to fully spread your wings, so to speak. So my job, I'm a consultant, I'm a developer, which is both. I both go and talk to the clients, hear their pains, and try and convert those pains in, like try to solve those problems with, with BI solutions. Go figure. So some of the areas I work with is listed up here. Data warehousing is one of our core components in a good BI solution. A lot of reporting tools. Two things I want to highlight here, SQL and OLAP. Those two combined, having just a basic knowledge of those two is very valuable. Otherwise, additionally, I also do some HR-related tasks, like standing here. So I wouldn't call this the best definition of BI, but this is one of those I like the most. And getting the right decision support to the right people at the right time is very vague. But you will find similar definition where it says the right data to the right people to the right time. And those are typically analysts and IT people that create those kind of definitions, anticipating that people just by having the right data can make the right decisions. And I've seen plenty of evidence that that is not the case. So rather than just thinking that data is good enough and people are just going to inherently know what you know, you might not make it as far as you think. So we want to talk quickly about what is business intelligence versus business analytics and why you shouldn't really care, in my opinion. So I grabbed some quotes online as the good researcher I am. Some would argue it's the same thing. And there are organizations, I work with organizations that in some areas they call it business analytics and some put it under the umbrella terms of BI. That's perfectly fine with me. As long as we have a well-defined project, I think we can all live with whatever we're going to call it. Some would argue that business analytics is actually a function of BI, meaning that you have BI and out of that comes business analytics. And vice versa. One of the ones I like the most is actually that BI tends to be more for reporting, more of a what has happened, where analytics is more free-spirited, more maybe slightly more future-oriented, slightly less concerned with the whole enterprise. And this is kind of what I want to signal with these two arrows pointing in each direction, is that not necessarily that they are in any way against each other, try to flee from each other, but with a slight overlap. Analytics tend to be more for the analysts. It's rare that you see a well-functioning team of analysts together. It's typically a lone wolf kind of deal in many organizations. Meanwhile, you have enterprise BI, where you're trying to, not having this single report created in Excel, you're trying to have 200 people, 10,000 people on the same page, looking at the same data at the same time. And that is predominantly what I focus on. While I want to cater to the analyst, but typically, if I just give them access to the data, they can fend for themselves. They know how to pull the data, they know how to organize it, how they want to do it, and quite frankly, for all those ad hoc questions they have to deal with, it would be weird if I would be able to anticipate everything they would need. So I will just need to give them access and they can go run. Meanwhile, I have a whole enterprise that needs to be on the same page. So a quick picture of I made this drawing here yesterday. You may have, don't applaud, that would be weird. So I'm gonna point to the screen for 1 second. So we have, on the left side, we have a set of sources. Essentially, like you already know, you need to have data coming from somewhere in order to be able to analyze upon it or look at any performance result. We have a box called ETL that stands for extract, transform, load. You extract the data from whatever source system you have. You transform it, meaning that you organize the data, you put it into the right format, and you load it into your data warehouse, which is essentially a database holding the single truth. It's not delightful. Meanwhile, we have OLAP, which is a separate kind of database. We might spend a minute or two on that. I certainly can talk for hours on each of these topics here, actually. So this is kind of, again, ambitious. Finally, where you guys most likely will come in, it's reporting and analytics. We've now pulled all these different sources together. We've found a single truth. The data is ready, available. Now you take it and run with it and make knowledge out of it. At this point, the data warehouse, no business decision are being made. However, I can put up notifications, I can put up triggers. Hey, this is more than 10% up, this is 10% down. Call someone, right? But that's not a decision, right? It's, well, it might have been in the 70s, but these days we're slightly more advanced, aren't we? Finally, we have the user. Again, this is where you guys come in. And recognize also a lot of people see this model, but they only see the arrow going one way. You go from a source, you go down to the user. Again, that is somewhat inaccurate because what really happens is that you get down to the user and the user says, that's wrong. Right, must have entered it wrong into the system because that's where we pulled it from. So now we're going to go back to our system, fix our system, fix whatever data, whatever misspelling we may have had, and eventually our reporting also becomes a project of data quality. We're now improving our own quality of data. You'll also see that from the ETL part, we have arrows going back to the source system. And that might seem counterintuitive, but the point of those arrows is more the fact of, I might have 5 different systems that all have a customer table in it. But the table that really is updated with the latest information happens to be from customer service. These are the ones that constantly update its customer record, whereas in the sales system, that might be the very first day they walked in and it was never seen again. So you may have 5 different versions of the same customer. And this is where the ETL can go and say, who's your daddy? And then push that information back into the source system. And again, while it might have been starting as a reporting analytics project, we're actually also cleaning our own data in the process. Again, very delighted by these results. So, typical data sources. Your accounting systems, your sales systems, you have some spreadsheets with your budgets in, you have some mapping, and mapping is not an actual map of the countries. Well, it could be actually for shipping companies, maybe. However, more likely, what I'm talking about is a map of if you have, if your system did not account for a certain grouping. When you work with variables, you sometimes need to create some custom groupings. You need to create dummy accounts. You need to split something into 2. You can create these manual maps. So we load it in, and then it will be automated. So we know that every time a record comes in that has a specific value, we know to turn it into a blank. And it's all these different sources that we, with the help of ETL, want to move this into this single truth. And this is one of my favorite slides because this here basically illustrates. On the rows, you'll have business processes, you'll have sales, you'll have inventory. On the columns, you'll have conform dimensions. Now, all of these are individual business processes, typically hosted by separate departments, right? You have an inventory, you have a sales, you have an HR department. And they may all have their idea of what is a product. They may have separate systems, right? Again, you might have multiple companies. We work with some of our wineries. It's in fact 12 companies put together into one data warehouse. And when you need to have 12 companies all agreeing upon what is sales. Now, a quick raise of hands. How many here think that everyone agrees what sales is? Right, no hands up. Either people are shy or they agree with me. It's always nice starting it with a negative. Always right. No, we don't agree. We actually had a company that I think it was like 6 months ago. Finally, after 8 months, they finally decided what is sales. What is sales to this company, right? One of the most central things for survival they couldn't agree upon is freight included or excluded. Discounts, right? Net sales. What is net sales? Is that then without freight, without discounts, with discounts? Or what about returns? Do we include the credit memos that pulled out? Like I sold 10 bottles, but now they returned 8. Have I sold 10 or have I sold 2? Yes, that math makes sense. Good. And this is what the ETL, this is really the task of it. And that's kind of illustrates the fact that this is not an IT project. There's no way you're going to get any success out of just sending this to IT and have them done this. You need to have a close, let's see here, boom, business, a lot of business. We're going to go back to where we were. Great, data warehouse, our single repository, our single truth. This is optimized for delivery. This is what we call a star schema. If you want to learn more, read Kimball, Ralph Kimball. He's the expert and the guru in this area. What you'll notice here is how we've stripped away the details from the main fact sales, which is where we have our main sales. These are the tables, like if you can expect to have many rows in any table, it will probably be in the invoice, hopefully. Or it would be in the inventory. It would be one of those where it happens a lot. Meanwhile, a customer description or a date doesn't change, right? There's no reason why we should spend performance on repeating that for every record all the way down. So what we do instead, in order to optimize this, is that we strip out any details and put them into their own dimensions, and we link the two with a key that is a neat integer key, which makes it very, very efficient. So when you guys want to look up things, I imagine you probably heard of VLOOKUPs in Excel. You may want to think, maybe do the VLOOKUP on an integer instead of a string being a written text. You might find it going much faster. Computers are just better with numbers than they are with strings. And this is what we do. So essentially, it's not going to be a big deal having 200 million rows in one table, because it's really just 5 columns of keys and then 2 columns of actual numbers. And if I wanted to write a report and say I want to see sales by customer, I can join those 2 tables together, only include the fields I actually need, and there's no waste. So again, this is what we like to do with a data warehouse, is to turn our ugly sales data, we want to turn it into facts, only the numbers we care about, the metrics, and dimensions, which is the context. I like how all my slides, when I created this was yellow. I don't know what happened, but suddenly it turned blue. Interesting. But this is a typical model of how an OLAP looks. OLAP stands for Online Analytical Processing. And what is really cool about OLAPs is that while you have Excel, when you do a sum on Excel, what is actually happening is that it is taking row by row, cell by cell, and summing it up. Slightly simplified, but let's just believe that. And OLAP Cube takes those relationships we just saw in the stock schema before, and it creates these relationships and pre-aggregates. So if you see, for instance, for any products, it will pre-aggregate, for instance, sales amount. For every product it has in the list, it will always say, if I just look at sales by product, it will find that amount. So when I call it in my reporting program, the number is already calculated. So even though that number may represent 200 million rows, it takes a second to pull it because it's already calculated. It's when I processed the cube last night. So it's there readily available to us. And you can do, I think in this example, I have store and I have dates. So for each of those combinations in a multidimensional space, it finds every intersection between every dimension and pre-calculates the number. Very, very neat when you want to look across 10 years of data, billion rows, and you get it in a couple of seconds. I don't think Excel has yet gotten to, I think it's like 1 million rows now. I don't know. It's not very good. This is the back end of an OLAP cube. You can kind of see how the star schema is in the background. You can kind of see on the left how I have turned those ugly tables you see right there. I've turned those into a list of measure groups and dimensions. And what we want to talk about here, I'm pretty good on time, delightful. When you have these tools, like an OLAP tool, we want to, I like to use this MAD framework, just because it's called MAD. Monitor, analyze, drill. You kind of have to expect, okay, what are my users first and foremost? Understand who will be using this. Is this for the executive, where they just want to see the high-level stuff? Is this for the analyst like you? You want to be able to drag and drop things in and say, hey, today I want to see it by fiscal year. Tomorrow I want to see it by calendar year. The next day I want to see it for a specific product. You want to be in the analyze level. Then we have customer service, who actually needs it down to the very lowest granular, needs reports about their performance. How many calls did they complete? We're down at the very lowest level. I'm going to give you a few examples of each of these levels. So this one here, executive dashboard, rather old one though, sorry. I pulled it from a hospital, so you'll notice that it has like patient discharges, and it has some house charges, and it's very high level, just kind of gives you an idea of the trends. And you will notice how big of a difference there is between actual charges at a hospital and adjusted charges. These are real data, by the way. Let's imagine I clicked on one of those bar charts, and I will automatically drill down to this. I clicked on one bar chart, and it drilled me down to the detail level, and now I can see for specifically that period of time, for that particular hospital or group of service or whatever I clicked on, and you can kind of create these drill patterns, and I'll give users an ability to self-service, if you will. Very important term in my ability. Another self-service is our OLAP. There's a ton of OLAP tools out there. There's Tableau, there's Target. One of the most popular ones is still Excel, because most likely you already have Excel. This is connected straight to an OLAP queue. Just gets manifested as a pivot table. I think this last night, I don't know, maybe it took me 20 seconds to make this. Just pulled in posting date, pulled in the values, it just appears. Said, hey, I want to turn this into a graph. And very, very easy on an ad hoc basis. But as an analyst, you were still constrained all the way down to how I created things in the data warehouse. All of this trickles through down to this point. So that's kind of when you are a BI developer. Already when you have the raw data, you kind of need to already have this in mind. How is this going to be visualized? And so returning to my point that I hopefully will repeat at least 5 times, you'll check me on that. Business. We need to have the business users included in this process, because there's just, again, no way I can guess what is it that they're really interested in. Now, what do you think happens if I just pull in everything? Which is, by the way, what users will tell you. If I ask them, what do you want? Just give me everything, I'll figure it out. All right, you will have, I don't know, you will have 100 measures to choose from, you'll have 25 different dimensions. What's going to happen is that they're just going to get paralyzed with the detail, and you will find that very little of all your effort has actually been used. It's a lot easier to let them be longing for more, give them exactly what they want, and otherwise have them go to the analysts for all the stuff that they can't get themselves. So again, OLAP is very, very good for self-service. I want you guys to think about that when you spend your time analyzing above 1 million rows. Then OLAP might be something for you guys. So let's talk a little bit, why do we want to have BI? What is one of the main benefits? I've already mentioned we have to conform dimensions. We have a single truth across the whole organization. We all agree upon what is a product. When we go to a board meeting, we are all looking at the same numbers. You will be surprised, probably not, surprised how many meetings where you at least spend 20 minutes on discussing whose data is most right. I've been to one of those meetings, and it's awesome. You just sit there and wait until the biggest dog in the room starts barking, and then that was the right data. You have, again, think of the time you spent, what is it that, if there's any teachers in the room, what would you typically say? Is it 80% you spent on cleaning the data? Is it roughly, am I close here? 70, 80%? Yeah, see nodding heads here. This is something we automate in the ETL process, right? every night. This is just whatever, however the data come in, whatever rules that you guys define in your like single data set in that Excel spreadsheet. It's just every night. It's just going to be cleaned the same way. Just doing it the same. And if it should ever fail, you can always just go in and tweak your logic a little bit. And meanwhile, you're getting the same rules for everything. So it really helped with the automation of reporting. And that is going to help you guys, because guess who's the one creating the reports? I don't think the CEO is going to bother, unless he has like a ad hoc tool he can play with himself. He's going to ask the analyst, report monkey, I need some reports. Data quality, we talked about that. Security, that's a different aspect. You have the ability, typically with an OLAP or reporting, you're better at employing the correct security so that you can see exactly what is for you to see. It comes from the same place, it's conformed in the same place, but in that aspect, I can have the sales rep see the numbers that only pertain to that particular sales rep in that particular sales region without being able to see. And again, that is very helpful, for instance, financial institutions, where insider trading is quite a thing over here. You have healthcare, where you don't necessarily want to give the ability for everyone to see names and the social security numbers. May want to hide those. Finally, self-service, and I see that again, my arrow is turned purple instead of blue. And I just want to kind of say, in general, I see the biggest feature of BI is just the fact that it supports this decision-making process, and it provides a foundation for you guys to work on top of. So let's talk a little bit about, and I'm going to say you guys, I'm calling you all analysts now. We want to avoid you guys turning into report monkeys, spending all Monday morning, not all Monday morning, 8 hours Monday, just collecting all the different data, creating all the reports. You're doing this every freaking week for the same people. They just want it in the same way they got into it. And you're just doing the same thing over again. There's no new, and you can't possibly change it, because then they lose their ability to compare. And these people are above 60, so they're not going to change. That's how they want it. And no offense against people above 60, but they tend to be less agile. No offense. You have the ability, when you work as an analyst, you have a BI tool. It's already a portal. There's one place people go to get their data. If you make something really awesome, you might have the possibility of piggyback writing on top of that. Maybe having a link to your report in the same portal. Or you may realize that, hey, we have this BI thing here, and people have the self-service, but there's just areas we do not cover. So I was asked to create this report. It became very popular over the next 6 months. I became a report monkey. I started making the same thing over and over and over again. And I realized maybe we should embed this into our data warehouse. The logic I've already created in our Excel spreadsheet, I just need to tell the BI developer, this is what I do every Monday. Could we automate this? And there's surprisingly few analysts who does this. And I would argue some of us might like being the gatekeeper, but the best analysts is the one who work themselves out of a job. Those are the ones that can complete a task, the ones who make themselves useless in that they have automated it completely, because you're not going to get fired. If you create all these projects and create all these results, and the organization is not going to say, all right, we don't need you anymore. They're going to give you 30,000 more in your paycheck a year, and they're going to find some more advanced and more fun project for you guys. And that's also why analysts tend to be involved in these projects. It's also because they inherently already have been creating these reports over and over again. So a lot of times, if we can, us BI developers will say, hey, do you have an analyst who's already been, kind of doing this already? Could we get that person onto the team? Which is why we want to talk a little about the good analysts. I don't think we have time. That's good. So, in my opinion, purely my opinion, there's no research behind this. This is just me working with the roughly 100 customers my company have. A good analyst is service-minded. Is understand that they are in a support role. They're not making the decisions. They're supporting others to make the decision. And when you need to support others to make a decision, you don't provide them with how many degrees of freedom
your particular statistics have. No one cares. And this is, again, I'm sorry, the lone wolves, you spend hours on this, and it's awesome. And you need to get a support group where you can call other analysts and talk about how cool the things are, because no one else is going to care. And I've been there, and it's terrible. And you spend all week on a report, and people are like, huh, all right, it's good to know. Thank you. We can't have a meeting here, so you can leave now. And that happens more than you would think. And don't get distracted by that. Don't start blaming them. Figuring out, what didn't I get right here? I did not visualize it correctly. Blame yourself first and foremost. That is most likely the most productive feeling from all of this, even with poor management. I don't know if this is my fourth or fifth time. You need to understand the business. Does not matter how well you are juggling numbers. If you don't understand the business, if you can't tell the difference between gross sales and net sales, if you don't know what is an asset, what is a liability, how are you going to help finance build reports? And that you spend all your time on linear regression, multivariate. So this is going to be the new thing. When you get into a new job, and you might already be working, one of the aspects is that somehow you're going to retain your skills, you're going to keep analyzing, but you also need to learn business. You also need to understand how are they looking at the data already. Understand the business rules. Understand it. When this cancel date is blank, what does that mean? Does that mean that it is an active customer? Is it inherently because they're active and inactive? That's a big deal if you want to do a churn analysis on, have people cancel or not cancel, trying to predict. You kind of need to understand, how do we define a canceled customer? If I want to have a dependent variable where I want to figure out what sales can I expect based on all these independent variables. I'm doing that right, yeah. Again, if you don't understand what is the true sales, what does sales include? Sometimes guesswork is, statistically, guesswork will be successful now and again. But we can obviously optimize our results by knowing a little bit more. This is the ones that I feel is one of the biggest things I've seen out in the world in my few years is analysts are not necessarily good at balancing the costs of what they're doing. Is the effort that they work on worth the squeeze? Spending 20 hours on this, am I really getting out? Am I really creating something that, hey, I created this new report, it's great, it's awesome, great, we'll save 10 cents. Good job spending 20 hours on that. And that is one thing that you need to be mindful of, is that don't get lazy. Don't try to search for oil just because I'm probably not going to find oil. Because the one day you hit that like gold, you will find gold in your paycheck too. Finally, be proactive. Don't wait for the business users to come to you. Go out there in your organization, talk to people, get friends in accounting. Get one friend in accounting. Don't go overboard there. They're devilish people. Did you guys know that there can be 13 periods in a year? Right, you have 12 months, but accountants have made up 13 periods. I'm just going to leave that hanging. The good analysts validates. You're going to lose the faith of your organization if you're going to report on bad numbers. Make sure that your stuff, don't get scared. I'm not saying you need to be a chicken. I'm just saying at least put some effort into it. If you find an error and you don't go in and say, all right, I just needed to change the sign of this number, and you just hit OK and forward and send. No. Make the effort, export the report, go into Excel, add up the numbers, and make sure that you actually got it right. People lose their job over this one. So, very important. Anyone here has bartending experience? Got two? Anyone has been a salesperson in any way? Right. So all of you that has been a bartender but not a salesperson, be a salesperson. All the one who hasn't been a bartender, be a bartender. This is obviously not, I'm not telling you guys to go out and actually become a bartender. It's a metaphor for your ability to listen to others. Bartenders happen to be great listeners. They happen to, they're forced to listen to drunk people all day. Not necessarily all day. Apparently you in this state cannot drink before 12 on Sundays, which is a different issue. But the good bartender listens to the users. right? You listen, you understand, you have compassion, you show empathy. Their lives is in shackles. They're not meeting their numbers. They're not getting it done. They might be fired. Don't make me a report that make me look bad. Salesperson is the one who can go out and sell a new idea and say, hey, wouldn't it be nice if maybe we should use conjoint analysis on this, figuring out if there's any of those products attributes, what is really driving people's the construct of quality of this product. And like, you know, is there something here? Go out there, be the salesperson, sales the idea, change management. Don't just wait for the users to come to you. And accept that requirements will change and appreciate it even. Be happy that people last minute change their mind and you have to spend another week reworking everything. That means they're engaged, right? They learned something new. The BI tool gave them some new questions. They want to know some different things. Life changed. Appreciate it. They still need your services. It may suck. Don't fall into the trap of stop answering your email or answering your phone just because you know they're going to change their mind. Figuring out a way to do project management. I already mentioned this once with the bartender thing. Understand there's politics. So don't be scared, don't be chickens, but also appreciate that these numbers may reflect directly what people are being paid. So be mindful of who you put on copy when you send an email. Be mindful of how you illustrate the data. Because reports tend to be very, very powerful. And I have an example of a pharmaceutical company where we built them a report. It's all well and good. It was meant for them to be able to kind of look on the last 8 weeks, what have they sold. It was very light, had very few requirements. 2 years later, we realized that this is the report they use for scheduling and forecasting. This is pharmaceuticals. Now, we can all agree that medicine is seasonal, many of them at least. Cold is probably not equally across a whole year. You might see a higher density in certain months. But the problem is that this company only looked back and said, this is what we sold the last 8 weeks. This is what we need to create for the next 4 weeks. And so they were constantly lagging behind overproducing. And this is a big pharmaceutical company in this country, a big one. Just a simple report used for something completely different. So when you create something, when you put something over it, it's your children. Make sure to go check on these reports. Make sure and figure out what are they being used for. Because someone will ask, so who created this report? And you can say, well, I didn't create it for that. I created it, it was Ted Turner. He asked me for this, but he's not in the organization anymore. And it's kind of fitting for myself. All right, Q&A. So do we have any questions? Sure.
You said you chose the larger company or the smaller company?
The smaller company.
Okay, why did you make that decision?
So, well, it was a difficult decision because first and foremost, this huge company actually also had offices in my home country. So I saw the idea I could get over here and do an internship and possibly have a job home in Denmark. But the role, and this is turning back to the point of understanding what corporation you're walking into, I could see myself, what is it, the kind of job I would be doing. And I would be writing the, what is called, documentation. That would be my primary job. I would essentially, other people were doing the hard work, and I would be writing how it to be used. Now, in any organization, if you're willing to work hard, you're going to grow. There's just no way. Like if you're all like me, I want to do good, I can't help being proactive. I knew that I would be successful in whatever I want to do. But I've already been in one job where I started copy-pasting links and worked my way into a different role. I wanted to, this is my first job, or my internship, right? You know, I hoped it would turn into my first job. And it was very important for me that I chose my first place to be a place where I would learn a lot. Small companies are inherently, you're wearing a lot of hats. There's no room for micromanaging. There's freedom. I come into the office whenever I care. I leave whenever I care. There's a different freedom. There's less red tape. I happen to be a consultant, which means that across the 100 customers we roughly have, active customers, which of course, you know, sadly, not everyone needs BI all the time. But I work with so many different versions, so many different industries. The same tools, by version I mean that a company, like several companies can have the same tool, but different versions of it. Like you really get so much faster learning than I would ever got in a big corporation. Now the downside to it is that, for instance, my wife worked for a big corporation. Their corporation rented out the Biltmore estate for their sales meeting. They rented Marble Island in Orlando Studios, whatever it's called. They have much better healthcare. They fly in first class whenever they go overseas. Those things I don't get in a small organization. But on the other hand, it's actually easier to make good money because you very, very soon become invaluable. So indispensable, I think, would be a better word for it. Any other questions?
We use the opportunity because a lot of what he's talking about is extremely applicable and relevant to what you guys are learning.
So on that note, I'll man behind you.
So you spend a lot of, or heard several times you use the phrase decision-making process.
Right.
What I'm curious about is, does your firm participate in helping clients figure out a good decision-making process that goes along with the reporting or analytics that you're giving them?
Sometimes. So we have customers that ranges from us doing everything to where we just need to kind of get the plumbing in, and then they're on their own. They have advanced. They're just one of those situations where sometimes out of convenience, you pay others to do it for you, but you could have done it yourself. So we have clients ranging from all the way. A lot of times we don't, because we are external consultants and are seen as such. Going in and actively participate on equal terms with them is difficult outside of the realm of analytics.
Let me frame that differently then. I more mean, so I have some background in behavioral finance and decision making as it pertains to investing.
Right.
Knowing how someone uses that process can drive very much what information you choose to give them.
Right.
So how do you balance that in producing good analytics, but then also facilitating a company to make a good decision?
That can be very difficult. First and foremost, there's a bias towards what they already had, right? What they had yesterday, and a lot of BI projects stopped with them just converting the Excel hell into an automated report process. And once you've done that, once they have exactly the same thing, you just needed to push a button instead of it, then you can actually start the real work. So that can be very, very difficult, and it really comes down towards building a relationship, a trust relationship, and that even more as you as analysts inside of an organization, you really need to build these relationships, because then it's when people listen to you. This is why I want you guys to be proactive, is because that's how it's going to come. It's going to be someone who broke the white page. If you're just going to wait for people, like if Henry Ford, I believe that is the name, Mr. Ford, let's just call him that. If he asked what his customer wanted, they would have been asking for faster horses, right? There was no car at the time. They would have asked for faster horses. That was the evoked set that was existing there, but he gave them a car. And try and think in that way, you know, hey, they're asking for blank. Say, all right, well, I mean, he or she who has the goal makes the decision. Analytics cannot get in the way of business. Have you guys ever walked into a Harris Teeter and then the lady just said, sorry, I can't check you out because the manager upstairs is pulling a report right now and it's taking off all the resources from my cashier? No, right? You cannot have reporting it up in the way of this. It happens. It actually happens, not in Harris Teeter, sorry. But in other organizations. And that's why data warehouse, we move data in a different repository. This is where we do the analytics from, so we can let people do. The same way, if people ask for something as an analyst, you're kind of obligated to give what they ask for. You can help them, you can moderate them. But the really good is, if you go out in the field and say, hey, I spent my Sunday night building something new, try to take a look at this. I know we're typically looking at this, but I feel like this new perspective might be more meaningful. So doing it actively, don't just talk about it, I think is the best advice I have if you behaviorally want to influence it. Show it, break the white page. Because people, a lot of times, they're just going to say, why are you asking me for new stuff? Like, I already know what I know. I'm making decisions every day based on this. So it can be an uphill battle. but it's worthwhile. I thought this, yes?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, what programming languages you use for ETL at your company?
So what we use is, actually we use an ETL tool, and I would argue that most people should, because writing everything code hand is error prone and it takes a long time. So choose something that automates it. Our tool is based on SQL. So whenever we drag and drop tables and rename metadata, what we're actually doing when we apply these operations is that we're creating these stored procedures of SQL that is running in the background. So SQL from a database perspective is the very most important thing. I don't really know any databases on an enterprise level that doesn't use SQL, including I also think analysis tools like SAS uses SQL. I know this actually because I've been trained on SAS and SPSS and R. And if you ever have questions on what software you should be using while learning, I have an input on that too. But no, SQL is the main language that is being used. However, on our online sources, miscellaneous sources, pulling in flat files, you might need to use some C# or VB script, Python to glue things together. Everything is fair. You might have some master data management where it's kind of, this data doesn't inherently exist. We're creating something new, like we're creating some artificial regions that isn't in our system of records. And we created like this web app out of C# and some web graphics and stuff where people could kind of manage their own data, and it got inserted straight into the data warehouse. And that way they got like some self-service even on the data quality side. So just learning one language and focusing on language, I knew nothing. Like I knew no language short of Excel formulas on a normal basis when I started this job. Like I knew nothing. Like I've heard of SQL, I've heard of these things, but I had no experience with it. It did not take me long. Like I said, 6 months, and I was already earning the company more than I was costing, and we're not a cheap company. So
I'm just really looking for any sort of like, internship opportunity, job opportunities that I can go ahead and get into this field. Do you have any recommendations on how to go about doing that?
it is a little bit difficult getting like the full access to what you really want. My suggestion is to, while you search for things, build your portfolio, your skills, like work on it, because the moment you can say, I can actively do this and I'm willing to prove it, it's gonna be a lot easier. Like analysts out there, they are pretty, like, I'm probably 3 times a week on average, I'm being asked by recruiters, like, hey, do you wanna have a job over here instead? So like, analysts and BI is very, very popular. You will be constantly, you might even block yourself on LinkedIn because you get so annoyed by people constantly bugging you. But searching for a job, that might be nice.
Yeah.
My approach was to contact companies.
Yeah.
Right. That's really, there are some portals. We search for interns ourselves. We won't need one until the autumn, but I'm going to leave my card here. You
Absolutely.
feel free to shoot me an email. So, but in general, be proactive. That's, again, I think job search that gives. Did I actually answer your question? Well,
Yeah, you covered.
Sorry, I kind of just jumped on. Yes.
Quick, 2 short questions. First one for the data warehouse. Is it Oracle or SQL, MySQL Enterprise?
I work on SQL Server, Microsoft Stack.
Microsoft SQL, okay.
I'm in the process of actually being certified in it too.
So then it's SQL.
And it's I prefer Microsoft SQL Server.
Okay.
That's what I work on, but that's, again, I could have been working on Oracle. It just happens to be.
Yeah, I just to figure out what's the platform. Second question is, there's 3 terms. What's your view of them? BI, BW, BO. Business object, BO. Business, BW, business warehouse, BI, business intelligence.
So business intelligence, I think we have talked about. Right. Business objects, I honestly never used that term. Okay. So did you say business warehouse?
Warehouse, BW.
And that is actually a delightful title because I like business. I want to constantly enforce that is so important because so many people forget it. But my thought on it is that I've never heard it being spoken to me. I've heard enterprise data warehouse, data warehouse, data mart. We could call it business data warehouse, but my thoughts on it really, I'm sorry if there's some inherent, I don't know if your coursework has these terms, I just haven't used them.
Yeah, like what you said, nobody care about sales, the same thing, nobody care about what's BI.
Right, and I think it's an honest concern, and it's sometimes become difficult. We had a hospital who asked for data mining. That's what they want a data mining. But, okay, you barely have any reporting, and you want to start with data mining. Good for you guys. And they realized what actually with data mining for them was this. This is the same hospital actually. This, the ability to drill down, to click on a button and drill down. You're mining for data. That was kind of their. I mean, again, that was what the salesman has told them, right? I can't count how many times I've heard people talk about big data, and it's almost getting to a point where that term is just utterly useless. It is. I mean, anyone here can give me the definition of big data? Right.
If it doesn't fit in Excel.
If it doesn't fit in Excel. Well, 150 million rows is very common for like convenience stores. Like you have a lot of transaction lines. Fits perfectly inside a database. I can easily load it in less than an hour. Doesn't take long. Is that big data then? I'm kind of leading it as it is not, in my opinion. Like you can have your opinion. I like the idea of there's a constraint, and once that constraint is broken, it's big data. But let's try, and just because I didn't have a strong enough computer, let's talk like more globally what is big data. And like, can anyone give an example of big data? So a windmill has 10,000 sensors at least, right? Constantly recording, or an airplane. It produces so much data that before I have loaded in the data, more has already been created. Like more data with the traditional method of loading in, extract, transform, load every time, the data will just be piling up waiting to be loaded in. You cannot complete. So there's a certain data size. That's just not enough. You can typically, with good coding, get around that. There's velocity. Two, how fast is the data coming in? Doing a complete, like have a data warehouse on Twitter. Across the whole world. Any tweet gets into my data warehouse, right? It's going to be very difficult to accomplish. And we have size, we have velocity, and in my opinion, also complexity. How complex is the data? If it's just a list of integers, it's going to be very easy to load in bare seconds. If it's text mining, like Twitter, like that costs effort. There's a model that needs to be trained, retrained, and it's constantly running, and that is to me big data. Just it feeling big, not good enough, but sadly, salespeople disagrees with me. They like to
Just comments about big data. SAS and IBM, they came with agreement about the big data, what we call 3 Vs. You mentioned a couple of them, velocity and volume and
So I'm happy that they agree with me. That's nice to be validated. But no, again, don't get too hung up in these words and paradigms. You're really just better off being pragmatic, understand again, be service-minded, hold their hands, understand it's difficult, and just enjoy that you have a very powerful role as an analyst. Any other questions? I see nothing else, so I guess, would Google Feeds agree with me? Are we done here?
Yeah, right on time.
There wouldn't have been much time for a demo anyway, would there?
You did it right on time. It was great.
Oh, by the way, don't call any analyst report monkey. That's not okay.
I was thinking we about our mascot, actually.
Yeah, that's not okay. Only use that term in safe places. Yeah. I think it's extremely helpful because even having a core understanding of the constraints of the language, it's going to help you get better, because the typical analysis will look like things like, just give me a